Hello and welcome to another episode of the Socially Numb Podcast. I'm your host, Richie Leahey. Today, like I said, we are doing another mobile recording. Well, I went ahead and got the Zoom H6, which is a handy recorder. Now, I've had a Zoom before. I actually had the Q3, which was a video handy recorder a few years ago, because I didn't have a video camera, and it was whenever phones weren't that good. So what happened was I went ahead, got the Q3. I thought, maybe this will be something that I can take with me and get live recordings of events. I was in a band at the time, and this is quite a few years ago. So I went ahead and got that, and it did work. That is what the live show clips were that I played in the past two episodes of this show. I went ahead and I went and recorded all those. Now, those were using the Q3 by Zoom. I was able to take that into the venue and get some field recordings, which was great. Now, as many of you have known, I have talked about getting some live recordings out there. And I'm going to Carolina Rebellion. I talked about it before. I mentioned before that we had went to the M3 Festival, and we went to the Carolina Rebellion the past couple of years. Well, I tried to go ahead and get us a press pass so that we would be able to bring in a bigger camera to do some YouTube shots for you guys, and possibly my audio recorder so that we could record live feedback while we're waiting, because there's a lot of waiting between good bands. So you're sitting there and you're waiting and we're standing. And the way the venues are set up, there's 4 actual stages. So we could be sitting there waiting for a band to play for hours at a time. And so I thought, this would be perfect. I didn't know how heavy the bands were going to be. I figured there wasn't going to be a lot of moshing. And this is day 2. So the first day, there was only mosh pits going really where we were for one of the bands. And that was Amon Amarth. And other than that, we could have went ahead and did a live recording show right there, whatever we were talking about, because you could hear the other bands, and I understand maybe they don't want audio recorders in there. But I did see a bunch of people with GoPros, like the mini cameras, or recording on their phones. I did get some recordings on my phone, so I'll be throwing those up. I might just share them on social media, because I'm not one of those ass wipes that holds their phone up for the whole show, or like even a whole song, knowing that they're never, ever going to watch it. But if you're curious on what the concert sounds like, I actually think my iPhone 6, I haven't upgraded due to the stupid decision to remove the headphone jack, which they said it was to make the phones thinner, but that was a line of bullshit, because the phone is like 0.1 millimeter thinner. It's not even anything negligible. It's negligible. It's nothing that you can even notice. That's what I meant to say. It's not noticeable at all. So they definitely bullshitted you, the consumer, to go ahead and upsell you on their own lightning port dongle, which the lightning port has been the worst connection port I have ever used in technology. It's a finicky device that never charges unless it's like sitting flat or perfectly still, where the USB one, like the USB-C or whatever they're called these days, are much better. So I hate the iPhone lightning port. I wish they would go ahead and do something more universal, but they try to upsell you on accessories, so I make a point not to buy any of their accessories, because I think that is bullshit. And the same with the headphone jack. That's why I'm holding out on upgrading. It looks like they're not going to come back, so maybe that might put me towards getting a Pixel. I don't know if the Pixel has one or not, but I have to do some research if and when my phone ever dies. So that's what I'm doing. But back to Carolina Rebellion. We're here. We went on day 1. It was definitely a lopsided event. I don't know how full the concert actually got. On day 2 here, I think there are more vehicles. They put us in the second lot. And on yesterday, we were on the really close to the stage when we got here at launch time. Today, we did get here a little bit later, but not that much later that it should be this full. We're on like almost the back lot, almost in the grass. Now, I did prefer the grass last year because it's easier to get out, and we did get a little bit more of a tailgating spot, we're stuck in between two cars today, so it's kind of a pain to sit here. Now, I'm sitting here drinking and eating some foods, something that we'll tie in with the tailgate on Southbound Sports eventually once we start to launch some shows on there. But we're going to have some tailgating tips and things like that. But that's the most important part of going to any live event is the tailgating. We actually had some chick come up yesterday and asked if they could join. It was actually 3 girls. So that's something that if you have a good tailgate, you can have people come and ask you to hang out with you. So that's a pro tip right there for any dudes out there looking for a way to pick up chicks if you're going to a live event. Set up a good tailgate that others can see from around the venue, because people will come over and they're like, yeah, I think we should be drinking with you instead of doing whatever the hell they're doing. We saw a couple dudes pissing in their car. One guy actually pissed inside the car because of wind. So, like, that's not the type of tailgating atmosphere that you want if you want to attract other people to hang out. And if you listen to some of the other recordings, we've had some success picking up stragglers in the past to stop by our tailgate. So we know what we're doing. But we'll keep going here with some more Carolina Rebellion talk. It's going to be a clip show. I'm going to kind of cut out and in. Might have a guest on or two. We'll see how the rest of the day goes. But I'm testing out the recorder, so I want to make sure that it's actually recording in between, because I haven't actually tested it. This is a live field test of the Zoom H6.
Okay, a little bit of a technical difficulty there. I have still been trying to figure out the new recorder that we are using, and we had the gear set up, had some people stop by our tailgate, and it looked like I didn't have the track set up correctly. So, not a fault of the Zoom H6, I just didn't have time before the concert to go through the manual. So I apologize, and hopefully this is something that we're going to use, or I'm going to use continuously for the podcast, instead of having to carry around my full gear. That's why I've been testing out different mobile recording options, so that the show can be more native and free, I guess, so that it's not as manufactured as a studio show. So, still here at the M3 Festival, and actually just finished up. Got to see a good mix of bands. Not as good as last year. So last year there were bands like Saturday had like heavier bands like Megadeth and Anthrax. On Friday it was classic rock bands like the Scorpions, Lynyrd Skynyrd. ZZ Top was even supposed to play, so it would have been even a better mix if one of their members got hurt a little bit before the show. So they actually didn't even get to play. And then Sunday, I'm pretty sure Sunday had Rob Zombie and some other newer bands. So they kind of tried to do the same thing this year. Friday had actually, I don't know, I forget when we had podcasts before. I'm not sure which ones we lost because we did a couple little clips throughout the show. So instead of it being like a clip show like I had planned, it's basically going to be 2 parts. And some of it may overlap a bit, but I'm sorry about that. There's just nothing I can do. I thought that we had everything hooked up and ready to go, but it didn't record the actual tracks. It might be something that's a setting, so I'm going to have to read through, and it will take time. I tried to throw this together on the fly. I should have had a backup source going using my cell phone, but it was pretty windy, and all that got was like wind, so I actually nixed that, and I didn't even set that up because I figured that's going to be too hard to clean up anyway. So here I am after the show, recording it. My voice might be a little gone, not as bad as in previous years if you listen to our mashups, but we had some people stop by. They said they're going to check out the podcast, so hopefully they like it. Again, we're just going to give our thoughts on it. This week, kind of a laid-back pod. Nothing too interesting. I do have some things in the works, some plans on spicing this up a bit in the future, but still throwing together some of my old projects and everything and getting everything up to date, which we'll be touching base on. I haven't done it for a while, but as the site gets set up, a lot of that's going to come on the podcast. and I'll riff about that a little bit. But Friday, we went and saw. Friday was definitely the best day. Now, my biggest disappointment with Friday was that they overlapped Opeth and Gojira, which are two similar bands. I understand that to get all the bands on the bill, they have to overlap them, and I might have talked about this before, but when you have two pretty big-name heavy metal bands, earlier in the day we saw Armoth, and they were heavy, and they were awesome, and they had definitely the best mosh pit of the weekend, and I wanted to keep that going, but we weren't able to keep that style of show alive while we attended because of the way it mixed up the genres and everything. So we try to go and we see and we wait and we go see Opeth, and they're good we watch them for about a half hour. We meet up with a guy, he's a member of a band in North Carolina, and so he is going to do the same thing we did. We watched about half a set of Opeth, and we're about equal, 30 minutes apiece for them and Gojira. We kind of left in between. It was staggered by like 20 minutes or so, 30 minutes, so that it was possible to do that. You just couldn't catch the full sets of each band. So what I normally do after a festival show is I'll go on YouTube or wherever they post it, and I'll listen to the full sets back, kind of see what I missed, maybe the sound, because after you get some ear fatigue, so I might touch base if I change my mind on some of the performances on some of the bands I talk about today. On this podcast, I might revisit them and make some updates after I listen to that, but that's my normal thing that I do, my normal routine after seeing a band play in a festival setting. And so that was my biggest bummer of the weekend, because those are two bands that I've been waiting to see. And I know they're touring some of the United States together, but no one really comes down here in Raleigh. Maybe if a lot of people hit Atlanta, and that's it. But Atlanta's like a good 5 or 6 hours away from me, I think. So it's not like a 3 or 4 hour trip that I can jump in the car and go. Say I live in Raleigh, so Charlotte's pretty close. I could do that. Even if they did there, that wouldn't be too bad. Or if they did do Raleigh, but they don't normally even hit Richmond up. So my options are either to go, if they go to Washington, D.C., which some of them don't, I have to drive either 5 or 6 hours to see bands. So it's kind of a bummer. No one actually hits the middle location for us, or for me. And if they go to Virginia or they go to Maryland, then me and my friends can meet up for other concerts, but because that's kind of in between for us. But a lot of times they don't do that. And so it's kind of a disappointment, but there's not much you can do there. So we go ahead, we watch them, we do the split. I'm trying to think who all was there on Friday, because it's a lot to take in. Trying to keep it fresh, though. That's the idea here. On Friday, we watched the headliner. It ended up being Soundgarden. So Perfect Circle started first. And Soundgarden came out, and they played all the hits. Pretty much like a greatest hits show, which was awesome. Chris Cornell came out. He couldn't hit the notes at all. I felt bad for him. I knew he had voice surgery a few years back, but I thought he might be in good, stable enough shape to throw down a good show. And I mean, the musicianship was there. He did hit a lot of the notes, but some of them he just didn't even try. And again, maybe it was because it's just like he might have been hitting them. I don't know. So if they put the show on YouTube, I don't think he's going to have time to overdub the vocals. I mean, maybe they do. I know they used to do that, if you're not aware. So if there was a live CD released, they would go in the studio and they would throw down vocal tracks over top of it so that it would still sound good even if they missed notes. And now in today's age, I don't think they do that anymore. I mean, I could be wrong. They might have a sound guy who's ready to go that has the isolated vocal tracks for each of the CD that he just throws down on top of the mix, as long as they're playing tight enough. But he was missing them. At least it sounded like to us. There could have been, there were some sound mix-ups, which I'll talk about today. But for the mashup itself, I mean, it was good. Soundgarden sounded good. He might not have missed notes. He might just not have been powerful enough. to hear in a live setting. So what I mean by that is when they do the video for it on YouTube, if the sound guy, if he is hitting the notes, he can just bump it in the recording, like add a little bit of gain to it, and then you can hear the notes. So he might have hit them. His voice just might not have the power it used to. So the low notes all sound good, and it doesn't sound like he's singing anything for the high notes. You just might not have been able to hear it at the show. But I don't know until I go back and listen to that if he did that or not. Those were the most memorable on Friday. So when I do this, I know I haven't really done it before, but I don't like to kind of read off the list and talk about the bands. I like to go by memory which band stood out. So if you're looking at the set list and you're like, oh, I want to hear his thoughts on this, email me or send me a message and I'll hit it up next week. But I want to go by memory off which bands made the biggest impression on me. So at the first day, those are the 4 that had the best sets that were memorable. On Saturday, there was a little bit less of that. I saw the Pretty Reckless. They were pretty good. And they had some good mixes there. The other band that I remember, and it might have actually been from Friday, was Radkey. And they were like a punk band where it kind of reminded me of the Nirvana setup where the guitarist just stood off to the side, didn't say anything. He just came up and sang, and they're a 3-piece, while the bassist was acting crazy and doing all of the set talking and everything. Kind of like how Nirvana used to do. Kurt Cobain was kind of like off to the side, like the shy personality, while their bassist, Chris, he would just go crazy. But that's who they reminded me of. They played a good punk set. So Radkey was another one. Them and the Pretty Reckless, I remember. There were some other bands that we wanted to see on Saturday that we went in for, but nothing too memorable. I mean, just thinking back now, the only other band that really stands out that I remember the set from on Saturday was Def Leppard, who were the headliner. And Def Leppard, they came out and played a lot of the classics. They mixed in some of the newer songs that I've heard before. Maybe let it be on the radio or whatever. I think I had to have like a couple of their newer CDs just to check them out, or on Spotify. I give most bands that I like new CD a listen to, and then if I like it, most of the time I'll purchase it. If not, if I don't like it enough, then I just keep it in. I add some of my favorite songs from it to my Spotify playlist that we share. But from there, they played a great set. They had a great stage presence. My friend, he was there. He wasn't a big Def Leppard fan, didn't know a lot of their songs, but he thought that they had great stage presence. And he said you could definitely tell there's a reason they've been doing it for 40 years, because they knew what they were doing. And while I talked about that, I did remember there was one other band from, I don't know what day, but we saw The Cult. I was excited to see them. I'd never seen them. I almost made it to see them in the fall of this past year, right before the podcast started. So I would have actually talked about them then, but I just didn't make it out. And so now I was like, okay, a good time to see them. Well, they didn't play all their hits, and they played a bunch of newer songs. I mean, I guess the set list wasn't too bad. It's hard to tell, like, when you go, they're not going to be able to, I mean, some of them, if they play longer, are going to be able to play all the hits. You would think that a band like The Cult had like 3 or 4 good, solid radio hits that they were going to play them. I think they played 2 of the 4 of the songs that I know that are in radio rotation. So it wasn't too bad. So I did know some of the songs they played. Some of them were like ones that I had no idea what they were. And yeah, it's hard to knock a band just because of the set list. But this is another one, and I think it might have been the stage that they were on. The vocals, he sounded like he was missing notes too. And for most part, besides Soundgarden was on a different stage. But most of the bands that were on this stage, they had sound that didn't make them sound, it made them sound weak. Like, I don't know if it was because a couple of the speakers were out, like the monitors weren't there, and the monitors weren't working as well, but the overall sound was just weak. The guitar parts didn't have the punch to them, and the drums sounded flat. That's where we heard the Pretty Reckless too. And like I said, They sounded good, but like there was just it was kind of like something was off. And whenever you saw a band at that stage, and we saw a good mix there, the crowd just didn't have the same energy on that stage. No one would move. No one would do anything. And I would say that it was off to the back. And it was pretty rainy. Or not rainy, but I mean, it rained a little bit. But it was windy. It was very windy on this stage. Because it was like a little bit more open than the other ones. And so I wonder if that had something to do with it. If it was like the wind was crossing it and blowing some of the sounds out, I don't know. But every band that we saw play there was something off about their sound. And I don't know how to put a finger, like I can't put a finger on it. I can't describe to you why the sound was off. I can just tell you that yes, the sound was off. And the other big band that I remember from, well, there were two more. One was from Sunday. I think Korn was from Saturday. So Korn played on the same stage. And we were excited to see them because I thought, oh, great, they're going to have a great energy, great stage presence. Everyone's going to be going crazy. Kind of like Amon Amarth did, where it was like a crazy atmosphere. Everyone's getting into it, jumping around. It reminds me of last year. Amon Amarth had the same stage presence and crowd response as Baby Metal, which Baby Metal was the one that really stood out to me last year where everyone was going crazy. That's what Amon Amarth, they sounded like with their set. And they did play on the same smaller stage, so maybe that had something to do with it. But when Korn came out, they're playing, they're going crazy on stage, but their music didn't have the punch. And at first, when we talked about it, I thought it might be due to them detuning their guitars. I thought maybe their guitars are tuned too low, and it doesn't hit you in the chest. If you've been to live concerts before, you know what I mean. The sound hits you in the chest, and it vibrates your chest, and it like makes you want to headbang because you can feel it. It like kicks you up, gives you some energy, makes you feel alive, makes you want to go nuts if it's faster, heavy music. Well, Korn didn't hit me. Like there was nothing. You could hear it, but it wasn't like the music wasn't in tune with like where it should hit you. And so I don't know how to explain it, but it might have been where we were standing. We were dead in the middle, right beside the soundboard, like where they did the mix. Which to me, that's where it should sound the best because that's where the sound guy's actually hearing the sound too. It wasn't like we were off to one side or off to the other side. And pretty much all the bands we listened to, well, some of them we were up on the left side. Pretty Reckless, we were up on the left side. Korn, we were on the right side of the sound thing, so like we were on the other side of the stage, and then same for the Offspring, we were on that side. So it was missing something, and I think like if you're by the soundboard and that's the guy that's mixing it, if I have the same sound, then yes, he should hear the same sound and know that something's off. But for it to happen to every band, like I felt bad. Like maybe a row of speakers were out, I don't know. Maybe it was just all of these bands didn't have the same punch. I mean, they were all different styled, but none of them were really heavy metal bands. There were none like that would have that. It wasn't like Opeth or Gojira even would have like that punch. One of the ones that I remember having the punch was Coheed and Cambria. We saw them on Sunday. They had some crazy crowd response at first. But then their set started off real heavy, and then they started to do like their experimental stuff, and the crowd kind of dropped off for them. But they had the punch at first. Another one too, who was at one of the headline stages, the opposite one, was Tesla, and they came out, and I thought they were more of a classic rock band. I knew a lot of the songs they played, but this time, and I had seen them before, where the show wasn't as tight, but they were very tight this show, and a couple of the heavier riffs you could really feel. And that's what I mean. You could feel the riffs, and of course it gets the crowd going then. So some of the bands on that other stage didn't have that. Korn didn't have it. We were disappointed. So on Sunday rolls around, the same stage we saw Tesla on, we went up and saw Volbeat. Volbeat, I don't know if it was like because their music wasn't as heavy, it was more like rock. There were so many crowd surfers that it was unbearable. Like I normally, so what our agenda is is we'll tailgate in the parking lot, have a good time in the morning. Whenever we get there, not in a big hurry, tailgate for a while, eat some lunch, and then head in. And normally we hydrate enough. We're drinking enough in the tailgate that we don't have to buy. We don't like to pay $15 for food or drinks. Like some of the drinks are like $5 for like a 20-ouncer, which if you get really thirsty, you can't have. Like you'll have to you'll go through $20 trying to stay hydrated, which I know Ozfest used to give you free water. I didn't see Carolina Rebellion doing that, which I mean you pay for the ticket, but I guess you're supporting the bands. But I think for safety reasons, they should have something like that, just because now this year it wasn't as hot. So it was cold. I did have to wear a sweatshirt, which means I have a wicked tan on my forearm, which is weird because I wore a sweatshirt and I pulled the sleeves up. So it's like right below the elbow. So it's not like a normal t-shirt tan that I could hide that I have a tan line. It's definitely going to be noticeable. And so that's kind of what we did. And on Saturday, Friday, it was fine. After the show, we would stop and grab a bite to eat at an IHOP or one of those late night, like a bar. We went to Kickback Jack's, I think was what it's called. So we went to a couple different places, got some food after the show. And that's pretty cool. Worked out pretty well. And on Sunday, the crowd surfers at Volbeat, I was breathing heavy because they kept stopping. And I'm a taller guy. I'm 6'2" about. A friend 6'3" or 4. And these guys are coming. And as they're coming, they get directed to us. And we're standing, there's a bunch of girls around. So of course the girls aren't going to be able to lift up. And I mean, yeah, if it's a girl, no big deal. They're light. But for some reason, a lot of giant dudes who shouldn't be crowd surfing were crowd surfing. So of course, when they come to us, it's a bunch of girls. The guys are going to dip down. A couple guys just fell. They fell. There was nothing we could do. One guy's thing got caught in my hand. I ripped out. I'm pretty sure it was a rope from his hoodie. Because they were coming so fast, there was nothing we could do. And they come through. We're trying to throw them. The girls are there. I'm trying to tap them on the shoulder. Hey, turn around. You're going to have to pay that. You might as well just turn around. You're not going to be able to watch Volbeat because the crowd surfers are coming so fast. And we were kind of beside where a pit opened up. And when a mosh pit opens up, the crowd surfers, everyone knows not to throw them to the pit because they'll fall on their head and pretty much get hurt. So they're coming right to us. And there's nowhere else we can go because there were mini pits on both sides of us. So the crowd surfers were right there. And the one girl, they were trying to film the show on a GoPro, which is one of my other beefs, which I'll talk about here in a bit. They're not paying attention. I'm like, hey, woke. She's like, well, we're recording or whatever. I can barely hear. I'm like, I don't care if you're recording the show. It doesn't matter because you're going to get hurt. Well, a dude comes around, kicks her square in the face. I'm like, are you okay? Because that was a hard kick. But there's nothing I can do. I had already warned you. And then another girl, she came up, and she's like, all the crowd surfers, and of course she probably weighed 98 pounds. And I'm like, you better be careful. You're in a dangerous area. And then she shows me that she had a lot of people were wearing bandanas over their mouth. I don't know if it was a new fashion thing. I hadn't really seen those in previous years. Maybe it was because it rained, and then they put down sod and stuff. So on Saturday and Sunday, it was really dusty when the wind would blow, so dust was everywhere. So maybe they were doing that to keep it out of their mouths. I don't know, but she pulls hers down, and her nose is broke. She's like, I already broke it in the mosh pit. And she's like, I'm going to go back in. I'm just over here taking a breather. And I was like, wow, that's pretty hardcore. And so she went running right back in. So eventually, a lot of the girls, they left. I mean, they couldn't stand there. We were pretty close to the stage. And I have some of the videos. I'm probably going to go ahead and put them up on Facebook. I'm still in the middle, and on Twitter. I'm still in the middle of so normally what I do is I'm not going to stand there and record the whole song. Someone else is doing it professionally, but at least you can kind of see where we were in the video. So depending on some of them, so the quality varies based on how much light is there. So at night, some of them I don't really zoom in just because it's wherever I'm standing. But some of them, they have lower quality. Like you can tell it's pixelated and stuff due to the light. Some of them flash like lights and you can see the lights going. But at least you can get an idea of where we were in relation to the stage. We always try to kind of be in the middle. Most of the time you're off to the side a little bit just because of how wide it is. So all the girls, like, they have to leave because there's too many crowd surfers, and they're encouraging it, and a lot of the bands encourage it. So, I mean, whatever, it's a show. You can't complain, but if you're going by like yourself, I saw a lot of girls that were out there by themselves that were completely wasted. And the one band that it really stood out to me was Def Leppard. So Def Leppard, we come out and we're walking around, and there are like 4 or 5 girls that are like completely wasted by themselves, looking like they're going to pass out or throw up. It's like, why would you put yourself in that scenario? You fall, it's dark, something can happen. So if you go to concerts, please be safe, but that's kind of what you have to expect. People dancing around, mosh pitting, heavier stuff like that. So, on to, and I don't know how long this episode is going to be, but I'm going to wrap up my second part here and put and see what recordings we have. But I'm pretty sure we only have one, and I don't know how long it's going to be. So, any other thoughts, I'll give next week. If it's a shorter episode again, 30, 40 minutes, well, we try to aim for like 45 minutes, 50 minutes. But if it's like 30 or so, I'll just go a bit longer next week to make up for it. But because I'm not sure how long I went in the first bit. But the one thing I was disappointed about was they had the setup. Now, the setup for the show, and like I said, I had talked to the promoter to see if we could come in and just record the show in there. Yes, I know it was going to be loud, but I just have the pocket recorder, the mobile recorder. I'm recording on it now, and I plan, as long as it sounds good, I plan on doing it for the show most of the time instead of having to use, because I can plug my Shure microphone right into this. And that way I don't have to have my computer set up, and I can record more thoughts on things. So like if I go to a tailgate, if I go to a game, and I'm able to take it with me, it's not that big. Maybe the size of a book, probably a little bit heavier than a book. But I can record on location, and then that way I don't have to sit and kind of remember what happened. I can kind of give you thoughts on when I'm there, which would be unique, I think, to other podcasts. They kind of talk about what they did after the fact. And of course, you can't remember everything. That's why I'm trying to do this after the show, right after the show, so that it's fresh. Avenged Sevenfold is playing now. Watched a little bit of them, and they're pretty good. I'm not a big fan of them, so it wasn't too bad of a thing, but good band to end on. I guess a lot of people were there to see them. Definitely more people there for Korn and Def Leppard. Not so much for Avenged Sevenfold, and surprisingly not that many for Soundgarden on Friday. I honestly thought Friday would have more people. And if that's the direction it's going to go in, I mean, we're going to be seeing more 80s bands in the lineup. Because Friday was more of a heavy metal concert with the grunge rock and some punk. And people just didn't turn out. I understand it's Friday, people might not want to take off for work. But there were a lot of one-day passes that we noticed. And Saturday, it was like, I think last year had more people overall, but Saturday might have been like the peak of how many people I've seen. It was tight. You couldn't move. Even whenever you'd go to get a break, there were people in line. So one of the things is they have a ton of porta-johns, and for some reason, people get in a single file line. And there's 30 porta-johns in a row. So if you're in a single file line, and people are on their cell phones, they're not paying attention. They're going back and forth, blah, blah. There's a whole bunch of porta-johns you have to kind of pay attention to see. Well, these lines are stretching super long. So instead what I did is I would just walk up and go to one of the corners where there was no, the line was only in one place for this whole row of porta-johns, and I would start my own line and then just jump in there. And I felt bad for some of the people that were waiting in line, but I was like, you're at a concert. If you have to go to the bathroom and you're in line, don't be on your cell phone. Because if I can walk right up and there's 3 porta-johns that are open and you're standing in line not paying attention, every person behind you thinks that the porta-johns are all full if there's a line that big. And because you're not paying attention because you think you need to be snapping or you need to be reading Facebook, I saw people reading Facebook. I saw people like doing random things. Now, yeah, sometimes I check my phone if we're waiting for a band to start. But when you're in line, like, have some common courtesy. Because then you have people who are obviously, some of them are just too drunk to do anything. So they're just stumbling around and everyone's waiting behind them, telling them to go, and then they don't go. So I just start my own line, and I had no problem going right in because every time I went up there, my buddy was laughing. I said, you want to go wait in that line? You're going to be waiting there. There's a bunch of open porta-johns. He's like, no, there's not. I said, watch. Every single time I went up, there was one that was open. I went right in. And then, like, other people would follow me out of the line. They're like, oh, well, I guess some of these are open. Because I definitely didn't take a crap in a porta-john, because I understand some people might have to do that. But again, the way we structure it is we eat a very light breakfast, tailgate for a bit, and go in. Just because it's crazy in there. So you kind of have to prep. Sometimes if your body's on a schedule, I understand it might not be the ideal situation. But, I mean, after the Volbeat one, when we had a bunch of people crowd surfing, had to buy a drink. Had to buy some drinks because I was completely dehydrated. It was hotter. And I had sunscreen on. Tried to get a little bit of a base. I messed up. I got my farmer's tan. Last year was way worse. I didn't think to wear sunscreen for some reason because I live in North Carolina. And I got so burnt and so messed up that, like, my face swelled up. I probably had skin poisoning, or sun poisoning, whatever it's called. Let's be honest. So my eyes were so swelled up, I had to, like, go to work the next week wearing sunglasses. Couldn't see. I watched Saturday and Sunday with so much sunscreen on that my face looked white because I was like, I can't risk getting burnt. But this time I got a little bit of a base. We had 100 proof sunscreen because my friend, he's paler than me. So I put on like a smaller, whatever, 15, 30, 20 or something like that, sunscreen on for like half the day. And then I go ahead and put on some 100 proof just because I figured, well, I probably got a little bit burnt. And then even with the 100 proof the one day, he got burnt. Which means if he's getting burnt with 100 proof, I'm getting pretty burnt. But it wasn't really my face. My face looks fine. It's my scalp. So when people are crowd surfing, my head feels like I'm just getting stabbed with 1,000 knives. He wore a hat. He didn't have the problem. But I mean, you wear a hat to a metal show and you're mosh pitting, kind of at your own risk. But like I said, circling back, we talked about trying to get the show recorded. And I wanted to do some video. And I understand if people are interviewing the bands, but they had no photographers up on stage. They had no press. Some bands did on their own, which means maybe I have to go through the band instead of the concert promoter. Because, like, if no one's covering the event, heavy metal needs coverage the most. For being honest, they don't get the press on the TV. They could have used the extra exposure from coming on the podcast. I tried to get it for you guys, tried to get some interviews. Maybe future down the line, I can do it over the phone, over Skype, over FaceTime, something like that we can get some thoughts on. I'm more interested in gear. No one asks about gear anyway. What's that site called? Gear Sluts or something like that? I think they do, but really the technology behind, like, recording, that was one of the ones. So I really like to see more of that, and I'd like to have the opportunity, but it didn't work out for you guys. Now, one thing that did bum me out is they said they couldn't take in professional cameras. Wouldn't let me in. I have a camera that has a detachable lens. But it appeared that they let people in that had GoPro cameras or smaller. Yeah, I understand. So my camera is a professional camera. If I brought it in, I'm going to have professional photography. They're letting in people that have pocket cams that I didn't even know people still had. And GoPros, which I understand. But people had GoPros on their head as they were mosh pitting. People put them on those selfie sticks, which I don't know how they got those in. I mean, maybe they're like, yeah, maybe we're allowed, but I don't know. They don't know if they snuck them in, they threw them in a bag, and they're like, what's that? But they're like aluminum sticks that anyone could throw or hit, and I'm pretty sure they're pretty cheap, so you could throw those. They wouldn't let us in with our 100 proof sunscreen. So the first day, we had bought an aerosol version. I guess it's aerosol, I actually don't know. But it's like one of those can ones. They're like, no cans. Because people throw them. Well, that didn't matter because people had full aluminum beers. Someone threw so there was a girl trying to get people to take their tops off. She was like yelling, and she was kind of standing by me. Someone threw a beer at her, and of course, dudes can't throw. So they miss her, and it hits off the guy's head beside me. and then ricochets into my ribs like a full beer. But you pay like $10 for a beer, and you throw it at some chick, like, what's wrong with you? And I don't know, but what's the point? We can't take in a sunscreen bottle, but you're selling aluminum cans that dudes can throw full beers. Maybe they think, well, no one's going to spend $10 and then not throw or not drink it. But no, there were tons of people throwing beers, which I don't understand that. That's not fun. So anytime I saw someone doing it, I had to tell them to knock it off. One guy was on something. He got into my face after like he was like running into me. There was no mosh pit or anything for Coheed and Cambria. So I told him to knock it off. And he came up and pointed to his chin like he wanted me to punch him. And I was like, looking at him like, what's wrong with you? Why would you want me to hit you? And the guy behind us was like, I think he's on drugs. I was like, all right, let him go. He like left the show, said I ruined it for him or something. He was yelling something. He like told like 4 people behind us. But I was like, dude, what are you doing? Like, if you're going to come to the band, I understand. It's clear if you go to a show where the mosh pit is. It's clear where people go and crowd surf from. But like, we were in the back. It was Coheed and Cambria. Like, we were in the back rows where there was only a couple people behind you. Like, don't come up. And I know it was a smaller stage, so the back rows would have been probably like near the front of the bigger stages. But come on, show some control, because people don't want to have to deal with that. They just want to come. We wanted to hear the band. And so I don't know. But other than that, no really any issues. There was one kid who, so the mosh pit for Armoth, he comes up, and he was like one of those he was a short guy. And of course, like I said, I'm big. Well, he's into it. He was trying to get into the pit at first, because he wasn't there when the show started. But I was like right along the pit, because I don't mind helping out for the pit, like being on the side, but not actually jumping in sometimes. Well, he got in front of me and was like trying to fist bump, but he kept hitting me in the stomach. So like I pushed him off. I said, knock it off. And of course he didn't. So I threw him into the pit. Because once you get into the pit, like, you're not going to, like, well, if I push you in and you're the wall for the pit, if I have to push you in, like, and you get pushed around the pit a bit, you're not going to be able to come back. Well, he comes back. I don't know if he was going to confront me. Like, why'd you do that? But, like, I had already told him to knock it off. He was elbowing me. And I wasn't going to sit there for a 40-minute set and have some kid fist bump the whole time, because I've had that happen before. And then I come home and have, like, bruised ribs. Like, come on, show some control. And if you're having that, like, don't touch someone else. Like, I understand if you're drunk. Well, I don't know if he saw how big I was and got scared. But he came after, there's another shorter guy beside me. He came after him. And the guy's yelling, don't you do it. Don't you do it. You're going to regret it. Because he was like an older guy. And the kid like looked like he was going to punch him. Then he put his arm down. And then he didn't. And I was standing right there thinking, dude, you're just elbowing me. And then you come over and threaten another guy. And the guy was there with like his wife. Like, they were just there to have a good time. Same thing, making sure the pit was safe, making sure no one was getting hurt. Same thing I was doing. But this dude, and then he stood behind me and he was like eyeballing me the whole time. I'm like, I know you thought it was me, or you knew it was me. Like, I wasn't hiding the fact, like, you were up against me. But that was it. Nothing too much exciting else happened. We saw In Flames. Their set gets weaker every time. Like, they didn't play any of like their metal songs. All their songs are like weird pop songs now. And I get it, some people might be into that, but I've seen them a couple times and been disappointed each time a little bit more. I think I sent that message out on social media. But they even said, so they took time out of their set as people were walking away and leaving them to be like, some people complain and say that this is not what metal is, but this is what metal is to us. But not to the fans either, I guess. I think their last album sold like 9,000 copies. Not anywhere near what their previous album sold. So it's hard to feel bad for a band whenever they're getting feedback. I mean, they're doing their own thing, I guess. But when you start as a death metal band with songs like Lunar Strain, and then you go up to like even like a newer death metal with Clayman, and I'm pretty sure they didn't. I'd have to look at the set list, but I don't think they played anything from Clayman or before. I don't even know. Yeah, I know they played some stuff from Come Clarity, but I would have to look. I'm not sure what order their albums go in, but which one. Clayman's like from 2000 something, 2001 maybe. That was like their last like perfect metal album. And so to not play anything like from that would be like seeing Metallica and they like play only songs from like Saint Anger or above. They like don't play anything from Master of Puppets or the Black Album. Because like that's how I see it. Like they used to play, so Jester's Race would be like their Master of Puppets. And then they have Clayman, which is like their Black Album. Like they're more commercial metal, but it's still great. And then they just decide like Metallica's like, we're not going to play Enter Sandman anymore. We're going to go play like Some Kind of Monster and Frantic and all these Saint Anger songs instead. Then the fans are like, what? So like In Flames, everyone's like, what is this? Like, why aren't they playing any of their songs? So they played like, well, two of the ones from Come Clarity are pretty fast. Leeches and Take This Life, I think. So they did play both those. Those are pretty metal. But other than that, the rest of their songs were not. They were more of the pop songs, so I do remember their set. I was disappointed with the side I didn't mention up to this point. But that's it. Not sure how long it went. Have to cut some of this out. Hopefully the recording is good. I do know some other podcasts that use this recorder. They gave me some feedback. I touched base with some people. So I'm hoping, like I said, to be able to record more often on location and get some other things. And then that way we can do some guests and the show can be longer. Next week, I'll think about it. I might rewatch some of the sets, maybe touch base on some other bands that I missed, and get back into some of my other projects, like going back through some of my videos and stuff. I have been working on getting some of my music videos up, going through soundtrack ones that I've done. So the first couple that I have been for video games. So I would like to launch those. I was going through and talking about videos I did of my brother's basketball. So I'm not sure where I left off on those. I have to go back through, make sure I didn't miss any. I did have some of my other computer projects or like some non-computer projects, like when I volunteered for Science Olympiad. I had talked about those before, putting those pictures up. I'm becoming close, getting all my computer projects moved over to the Leahey Report, LeaheyReport.com. And I am going to be working on the podcast show notes next. So once I get those over, I think I only have a couple more. The podcast show notes are next. Then everything will be caught up. And then the show will go more smoothly. Like I said, it's a big task moving a couple different sites into one main website. We're moving it to Medium from WordPress and from a mixture of WordPress and GitHub pages, Jekyll. So we have some technology there that I've had to merge manually. But it's going to be in one location. It's also syndicated on Apple News. So as I move those over, Apple News, it looks like that I published them current. But if you go on Medium, you can see when the original publication date is, because I kept that the same. So some of these are quite old. But you'll see, and I'm putting, like I said, I'm putting my videos up on YouTube. If you watch some of the stuff I talk about, check those out. I also have some of my other projects, so I'll be talking about this on a podcast, getting back into it next week. And of course, breaking down video games. So I have some other games to beat. Got to see where I left off, what games I'm going to talk about. But we'll see those next week. So thanks for listening. You've been listening to Socially Numb, and I am your host, Richie Leahey.